I know that Jeffrey Lurie and Nick Siriani are meeting today.
Yeah.
And the last time Jeffrey Lurie sat down with a Super Bowl winning coach and he didn't think he was going to fire him, he ended up firing him after this meeting. And that was Doug Peterson, if you remember. Mm-hmm. And you just never know like what the owner has in the back of his mind and what he's thinking, what his vision is, and whether or not it matches up with the coach that he's had there that's taken the team to the playoffs 3 years straight. I mean, think about this. Think about the success that Mike McCarthy has had in Dallas, Nick Siriani has had in Philadelphia, and then you compare that with what the Jets have gone through the last 3 years. I mean, just think about that for a second.
I know, but different situations, of course, and there's a lot of specifics that go in there, but you're right. If you just look at the regular seasons and you say that, Rob Saleh's Teflon and these two guys are on the hot seat, it looks ridiculous. It really does. But Rob Saleh's protected by Aaron Rodgers. He wants to play. Aaron Rodgers wants to play for Rob Saleh and all the people that he said yes to that went out on that private jet, as we've talked about many times before. And when you're a team that has recently won a Super Bowl like the Philadelphia Eagles and fell apart in the way that they did with a fan base that's throwing popcorn at the coach when he's leaving the field. And then when you're Jerry Jones, when you're 110 years old and you haven't seen an NFC championship game since the mid-90s, I mean, these are two places that's not like the others. Which place is not like the others? There's a few of them in the NFL, and those two, Dallas and Philadelphia, certainly are.
Yeah, the hard thing for me, and I don't want to speak for Dallas Cowboy fans, I just look at it from a completely objective bystander. Mm-hmm. And what I see is a quarterback who has basically been brought out and played his best year as a Dallas Cowboy
Well, I don't
player.
think he's going anywhere.
I know that, but I'm just saying the coach brought out the best in the quarterback.
Yeah.
And that is the most important relationship in sports. The head coach in the NFL and the quarterback. If you look at all these teams, the 8 teams that are left, you look at the head coaches, you look at the quarterbacks, those relationships are primed for success. And there are two organizations in particular that I look at right now that are telling me this is the way it needs to be done. And those two organizations are Green Bay and San Francisco. They are stabilized franchises with good quality leadership at the general manager level and the football division. They are great business, obviously, because of the growth of their particular teams. They have great, solid head coaches. They're not going to win a Super Bowl every year. They got young quarterbacks that, have figured it out now. And, those coaches could have been fired 3 times over as well. But, stability is the key. And, a lot of these times, those particular coaches get rated, because they've been so good at what they do that they end up, losing assistant coaches to either becoming head coaches themselves or becoming coordinators somewhere else.
Yeah. I'll give you 2 in the AFC, I think, are kind of in that same track. One, unfortunate circumstance with the injury, but the Cincinnati Bengals with Zach Taylor, and also the Buffalo Bills, even though they had their moments, but with Sean McDermott and where he's got them now, young quarterbacks figuring it out, stability, being there in the AFC postseason most of the time now. Those two, I think, mirror the two that you mentioned in the NFC. And, I mean, there's sometimes, though, it's a tough thing because – there's stability, and then there's hanging on to the wrong guy for too long.
There's also internal dysfunction that you don't know about, that we don't know about. We kind of knew that something was going on with the Giants about 6 to 8 weeks ago. We didn't realize the magnitude of the disconnect between the offensive and defensive side of things and the way that the defensive guys were hurt and their feelings were hurt. Who knew that the defensive coordinator was going to go to the owner and tell the GM to wear the headset and just listen to the head coach during the game? I mean, that's the kind of crap we don't know about until the season is over and then people start cleaning house. And I would say that, that's probably where Jeffrey Lurie is going to be with Nick Siriani today. He's going to say, this is not good enough. We need to get a new defense coordinator in here. We need a new offensive coordinator in here. We're spending all this money on Jalen Hurts. I can't have him regressing. We have to get him moving forward. We got to get him right. So, if Nick Siriani doesn't have an answer for it, then he's going to be showed the door. And, it was interesting reading and listening to Pete Carroll. Pete Carroll does a radio hit every week in Seattle. He had one more hit after he had been let go by the Seattle Seahawks. And he basically said it wasn't the football people that let him go. It's not the football people. I have a vision. I have a precise vision as to how we have to get this thing back on track. They were 9-8. They didn't make the playoffs 2 years in a row now. He got the most as he could out of Geno Smith. They're going to have to find another quarterback is what they're going to have to do. And, he had a precise plan in place to get it done. And he was challenged in the meetings with their owner out there and a couple of other people in those meetings. And he felt like he was blindsided by non-football people that fired him in Seattle. So, we never know how these owners are thinking. We never know what's going through their minds. We never know, what the fan base or how they're listening to the fan base. I guess if you're Jerry Jones, if you're listening to your fan base, they want Mike McCarthy gone.
But see, the history of Jerry Jones is with these head coaches is he doesn't listen to the fan base.
Which is great. I mean, I love the stability part of it.
But it might be different now because he's older, and this was a really, really bad playoff loss when they were a big favorite and they got killed at home. I mean, that might change things. And I think that with Jeffrey Lurie, I don't think it's listening to the fan base as much because the Philadelphia fan is as crazy as any fan there is. It's more looking at what happened. You lost both of your coordinators, and this team completely fell apart. You had no answers. You didn't get it back on track. And it looked to me like half the team didn't want to play in the playoff game, and you got your asses kicked by a team coached by Todd Bowles. What? Tell me how that happened. I mean, were you a fraud last year?
No, they weren't a fraud last year. They were great last year.
I'm saying, was he a fraud? Was he a fraud just riding a better roster with two better coaches on his staff?
Well, I mean, again, at the beginning of the year, I don't know how many times I must have said it, that the loss of those two coordinators is going to be big for the Philadelphia Eagles. Can they replace them? And it looked like for about 10 weeks in the season that they were able to replace them. But much like what happened in Buffalo, what happened in Pittsburgh, where they fired offensive coordinators in the middle of the year, they kind of rearranged their defensive staff. That never works. When you're keeping guys in the building and you're kind of demoting people, and you're having another guy jump over another, I mean, that creates so much insecurity and so many problems amongst the guys that have to go to work and work together each day. You're just better off letting a guy go if you can and get away with it like Buffalo did and like Pittsburgh did to some extent. But the Joe Brady thing in Buffalo is real. I mean, James Cook has become a real significant part of that team since Joe Brady took over. And that wasn't the case prior to that. And maybe there was just another, voice that needed to be in the ear of Josh Allen. And it's too bad for Ken Dorsey because he's a good coach. He's not a bad coach. He didn't get worse over the last 3 years. I think what ended up happening is that, Josh ends up doing his own thing on the field, and you got to sometimes couch these personalities and these egos, and you need somebody else to sit them down and say, look, we can't make these mistakes in the red zone. And with the exception of the Miami game, their last game in which they did win, where he was trying to play a little hero ball and got a little loose with the ball, for the most part, 6 out of the last 7 games, he's been the MVP of the league.
Yeah, and you mentioned the Steelers. Mike Tomlin reportedly told his team yesterday that he is not going anywhere, and these rumors about him taking a year off are unfounded. So we will see if that holds up to be true.
He's got to get a contract extension.
He's only got 1 year left.
That's right. He's not going to be a lame duck guy. And, according to everybody, Coach Cowher has always said to me that the Steelers don't negotiate during the season. They just don't. They'll let him get to his last year, and then they'll give him an extension. I mean, that's just kind of how it works. But I think for a guy like Tomlin, he probably sits here and he sees all these job openings and he sees all these numbers that these guys are throwing around and the amount of money that they're making.
Yeah.
I'm sure he's paid well. I'm sure Pittsburgh pays him well. We'll never know what they're paying him because they don't discuss contracts, and that's the way it should be. They don't have agents with loose lips. And I'm sure that Coach Tomlin is telling his agent, I don't want to hear about my contract in the paper, especially in a blue-collar city like Pittsburgh. We'll keep it on the down low. We'll get an extension done. He's not going to be there on a 1-year deal. That's just not going to happen. Because if he needs to hire a new offense coordinator, he's got to make a decision about his quarterback. He's got to make a decision about his offense coordinator. He won't be able to acquire somebody that he would really like if he doesn't have a contract extension.
And there's also the side of it where he might get a contract extension put in front of him and he doesn't want to sign it because he wants to be a free agent himself. And says, I'll see what's open next year, and maybe I just want to leave and go somewhere else, and this is enough of this place for me, and I want to change. I mean, that could happen too. And because, as we've seen in New England, sometimes enough is enough. Now, this was a miserable year for the New England Patriots, not so much for the Pittsburgh Steelers as they kept it together and went to the playoffs. But sometimes these things get stale. I mean, the league is not the same as it was when Chuck Noll was the coach for 1,000 years, and then Bill Cowher was a coach for a while. I mean, some of these places it gets stale. There's patience runs out from either
but I would
side.
say, to me, following the league, knowing these teams, pretty much as well as I do, like Pittsburgh and Cincinnati, they run the organizations the same way. Like they do not bow to fan pressure. They don't. I mean, they try to stay the course. They try to stay stable. That's why Marvin Lewis lasted, 16 years. He was going toe-to-toe with Bill Cowher every single year, twice. And they were always going against each other. And Marvin came off of Bill Cowher's staff. So like those two organizations, they are, even though the Bengals sometimes do get laughed at, I mean, they're a very successful organization. And they have been. And they, now if Joe Burrow could just stay healthy, they'll have another 10-year run in them.
Yeah, I mean, this is going to be a really important year for him to stay on the field and get back into that conversation. It's got to drive him nuts that Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen are going up against each other in this divisional playoff round, and one of those guys is going to go to another championship game, and he's just sitting on the sideline because of this injury-riddled season that he had to deal with. And, of course, that same thing happened in his rookie season where he blew out his knee. Yeah,
I kind of feel like Lamar Jackson wants to break up the Mahomes and Allen party. You know what I mean? I feel like he's a different type of player this year. I just kind of feel like he cannot wait to get on the field on Saturday. I'm telling you, he's been different all year long. You could see it in the way that he plays. He has all the secondary stuff that we're used to seeing, but he's so much better in the pocket and so much more accurate now. And I feel like he's matured. I feel like he's ready to rock and roll. Like there's expectations. He knows it. And I think he's going to live up to him.
Yeah, and he's going to have a test with a young quarterback and a good offense that he's going to have his defense go up against. And the Houston Texans, that'll be the first game. And with these teams on a bye, you forget how good they are sometimes because we don't talk about them for a couple of weeks, and all of a sudden they jump back on the field. We go, oh, that's right. These guys were the one seed for a reason.
In these coaching searches, the offensive coordinator for Miami is a big guy that's getting a lot of play. McDonald, the defense coordinator for the Ravens, is getting a lot of play. Raheem Morris, the defense coordinator for the Rams, is getting a lot of play. And, they're all coming from that same group of Kyle Shanahan, Sean McVay, all of those people. And that's the way the NFL is going now, especially offensively. That's why everybody believes that Bobby Slowick, the offensive coordinator for Houston, is going to get a job, and he's going to be a head man. And, the Panthers would probably love him to work with Bryce Young because he just got done working with C.J. Stroud, or he's in the middle of working with him. Or if you're the Titans and you want to lessen a team in your division, you take their offensive coordinator and you pair him with your young quarterback. And you see if he can do with your quarterback what he's been doing with C.J. Stroud. And he comes right out of that San Francisco 49er mold. Like he's going to be the next. He and Ben Johnson are going to be the next two, to me anyway, the offensive coordinators, and maybe Miami. Those three guys may get head jobs just simply because they're from within that system, and they know how to design and call plays, which would be very interesting to see which one of these teams can get their hands on one of those three guys.
That is the formula. Find the unexpected good offense and then pluck that offensive coordinator and make him the head coach. I mean, it's happened many, many times, and that's why the Houston Texans and also, we were talking about Ben Johnson last year. This year was the first year that Bobby Slowick his name was out there, but it was so good and so impressive. And if they somehow beat the Baltimore Ravens and C.J. Stroud is another one of those games and just lock it up that Bobby Slowick's going to be head coach somewhere.
I would think so, as long as he walks in there and he has a presence about him. But then again, did Mike McDaniel have a presence about him?
No, I don't think so. No, he probably
and
did
that came
not.
out of nowhere.
Yeah, no, it absolutely did. We had just learned about him a couple of weeks prior because he gave this really funny press conference because the coordinators talk on Thursdays, and he gave one of his patented press conferences, and one of the things he said went viral. And we're like, look at this guy. We didn't even know this guy existed out there in San Francisco. I thought it was just Kyle Shanahan. Who the hell is this guy? And then, bang, just like that, Brian Flores is gone and Mike McDaniel is the coach.